Hey mamas, you're listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast, the only podcast teaching you how to balance your work, motherhood, and wellness. I am Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist and mama wellness consultant. Each week we dive into tips and strategies and much more so that you too can become a balanced working mama. Let's dive in. Hey mamas, I hope y'all are doing well. It's Dr. Amber Thornton once again. Let's check in. It's good to hear. Well, it's good to talk with you all. I wish I could hear you all. But it's really good to be here yet again on another episode of the Balanced Working Mama podcast. Okay, so what's on my mind? What is on my mind? Well, first of all, this is episode 9. And I don't know if you all remember, but the first season of the podcast is 10 episodes. And so I guess the one thing that's really on my mind is the fact that this season is almost over. And so I guess I just want to say how much I've enjoyed creating this podcast and, developing these episodes and talking about all the core values of Balanced Working Mama. Like, this season has been really, really dope. And I think it was a very good first season. And I'm already thinking about, some of the things that I would like to have for the second season. I already know that next season, which will start in October. You all will hear from some of the mamas that I've worked with. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about guilt and anxiety because that episode seemed to be a really big one for a lot of you all. I think we're just gonna go deeper. So I definitely have some good things in store for season 2, but I do want to ask you all if there are certain things that you would like to hear more of on this podcast. Reach out to me, let me know. Y'all know where to find me. I'm on Instagram a lot of the time at Dr. Amber Thornton. But also you can email me at hello@dramberthornton.com. All that information is in the show notes. But yeah, reach out to me and let me know what would you all like to hear for season 2 of the podcast, because I'm definitely working on planning some episodes and I want to really know what you all want to hear. So we've got this episode, and then next week will be our final episode of the season. I will take a little bit of break, and then we will come back for season 2 during the first week of October. And that is going to be a special week because that also will be when the second round of Empower Wellness program begins. So we've got a lot of good things coming up. So that was the one thing on my mind. I think the other thing that's on my mind is the fact that so many things have been happening this year and within our community. Like, for instance, today is Sunday. As always, y'all know I record on Sundays, and I'm still really in my feelings about Chadwick's death. I was so shocked, and I know that I am not the only one, and I just think for me, it's just a culmination of all of the grief and all of the loss that we have all experienced throughout this year. Whether it be with COVID completely changing things, many of us losing people, losing relationships, just losing our sense of selves and routine. There's just been so much grief, so much trauma. And then that to hear about his death, his passing, for us so suddenly, but I'm sure for him and his family, it was not sudden. It just really, really took me by surprise. And I definitely shed a few tears because I just really, really felt, I don't know, it was very impactful for me. So I'm definitely thinking about him, thinking of his family, but even more broadly, it's just making me think, one, it's so important for us to really stay on top of our health, whether it's our physical health, our mental health, our wellness. That is not something to take lightly. That's just something it made me think of. We always have to stay on top of those things. So, whatever tweaks you need to make, whatever changes you need to make, figure out how to do it and do it now. Because time is not promised. We don't always have time. And I really want us all to be in good health and to be well. But I guess the other thing it really makes me think is Chadwick worked so hard during his illness, and it just makes me think, well, what are some of the things that we are sitting on that really could bring joy to the world? I don't want anyone to be sitting on their gifts, sitting on their passions, sitting on their joys. Really dive deep into those, whatever it is that you've been sitting on, that you've been wanting to do, that you've been wanting to try. Now's the time. Now is the time. Because you never know how much that thing could impact another person, but also it's for you. Do it for you, because tomorrow might not be promised. And so, those are just some of the things that have been on my mind. I know I'm not the only one feeling it. So I'm really thinking of everybody, because I know it's been the worst year that we've had in a long time. So really hoping that we can have a good fall and come out of this year in one piece. All right, y'all, let's dive into this episode. Before we dive in, though, I want to let you know this is a special episode, because this is going to be the first time that we have a special guest on the podcast for this season. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. Hey mama, I want to quickly tell you about the Empower Wellness Program. This is a dynamic 6-week group for working mothers who are tired of feeling overwhelmed, fatigued, burdened by mom guilt, but then also just not having enough time for themselves. This program takes all of that and transforms it into more wellness, more time for yourself, better priorities, community with other mothers, but then overall balance in your work, motherhood, and wellness. To learn more about the Empower Wellness Program, head over to balanceworkingmama.com. There you can find when the next program begins, what to expect, but then also how to sign up. Hope to see you in the next group. All right, we're going to dive in. So for today's episode, we actually have a special guest. So we're talking about delegating. And my thought behind this was that with delegating, you can't really do delegation alone. And that's the whole point of delegation. And actually, before we start, I want to just define delegation really quickly. When I talk about moms delegating, what that means is that you have to entrust something in the hands of another person or assign responsibility. But another part of this episode today is really not only just delegating, but really working collaboratively with the people in your life, whether it's your partner, your spouse, your family member, your friends, really working collaboratively so that you are not doing everything all by yourself. So that is where my husband comes in. Hi, babe.
Hey.
Welcome to the Balanced Working Mama podcast.
Thanks for having me. I always hear you in the background. I'm like, I wonder if she's ever going to invite me.
Oh, whatever.
Too much of a renegade.
Right. It's just scary having you on here because I don't know what you're going to say. So you all, if you all follow me on Instagram, you probably already know my husband. His name is Cedric. He's Cedric number 2. And so I really actually just wanted to have him on for a little bit on this episode because especially right now with the pandemic, he and I have to work extremely well together in terms of collaborating because it's just not okay for one of us to do things alone. One big decision that I made before I became a mother, and honestly, babe, you were a big part of me deciding I wanted to be a mom because I knew that you would not allow me to just do everything on my own. But with that, I knew I didn't want to just, I didn't want to be the mom that was sacrificing myself and my work and everything to run the household alone or to even be the sole person responsible for that. And so what I really value about our relationship is that we really do work very well together. We work very well, very closely hand in hand. And I think delegating and working collaboratively is just so easy with you.
Oh, thank you. I try.
It is. And so that's why I wanted us to have this conversation of what it looks like to delegate with someone. especially your partner, but then also some of the moms who listen, it might be more so they're thinking about how you delegate with their family members or their friends or outside people outside their home. So that's what I really wanted us to talk about today. Yes, grandma is big. Actually, our kid is with grandma today. So I actually just thought maybe we could just talk about all the times that we, really were very intentional about delegating and collaborating in our household.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Do you remember those days?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's perpetual, right? So it's like from the very beginning, we were very intentional about defining roles and, understanding, each other's capacity to do something.
Mhm.
And then, being able to assign them roles that, allowed for them to, you know, to accomplish that and still like have the capacity to do other things they want to do, right? So we didn't want one person to be overloaded or really one person to be doing something that may seem small, but because they don't either have the skill set or the true desire to do it, becomes a huge thing for them, right? So we took all of that into account, and like I said, that's from beginning since C3 was born. So
Yeah. Exactly what you said. It just makes me think about the very early infant days, like when he first came home, when we first came home with a human. And it was just crazy because really what I remember most about those very early days, it was just basically breastfeeding, diaper changing,
right,
and that was it.
Right. So, like for you, because so this is one of those things, right? So you breastfed throughout the night and throughout the day, and you did diapers. So really, everything else kind of fell to me. And I was happy to do so because even if you weren't like if we had to formula feed him, I wasn't trying to get up in the middle of the night, but you did that, right? So I said, okay, so with her knocking these things out, what do I need to do? What slack do I need to pick up? So I just started picking up a lot of the other things around the house. Me in general, I like to cook anyway, so
Thank God.
so making family meals was good. I can't remember the specifics, but it did, like pretty much everything else kind of fell to me because you were working with C3 around the clock, right? So again, your capacity wasn't there to do much else, and I understood that, and I appreciated that because I valued the ability to sleep through the night. So then everything else that happened during the day was kind of, I was like, all right, I'm gonna tackle this because I don't want her to feel the need to take these things on as well. I know my memory is bad, so I don't know if can you remember the specifics?
No, that was good, babe. That was really it. It was just, yeah, exactly what you said. I think we, honestly, I think a lot of this we talked about before we even became parents, that we wanted to be very collaborative in how we parented and how we ran our household. And so we just kind of naturally fell into it. But there was a lot of conversation. Like, for instance, I think bath time is just one thing that it's just kind of, I think that was one conversation we had where, initially it started out with you just doing it. And then I was like, you know what? I don't really want to do that. Right, you can have that.
So what I remember, so bath time, this was a whole thing at the beginning. The whole thing was bath time was in your head, you had this idea of, we do family bath times. We'd all be in there and, it'd just be like a sitcom. And
because I tend to romanticize.
Yeah, you tend to romanticize things. So, but bath time is a battleground. You gotta, especially at the beginning, it wasn't that, right? So I took that on, and then there was a time where you tried it, and it was a fail. The one time you tried it wasn't a fail. So I was like, okay, that'll be my task. And I've been doing bath time ever since. And, that's great because me and C3 have that rapport, and it's worked for us. Yep. So, bath time, boom, we know it's mine. I do it on specific days, and I manage that how I want to manage that.
Yeah. So. And I step away because I don't want no parts of it. And I think, and this is what I love about Balanced Working Mama is because I think if I were to just follow what I knew and saw growing up, I would assume that, well, I'm mom, I'm supposed to be doing the baths, or I've got to figure it out, or there's something wrong with me because I did it wrong and I don't want to do it.
Right.
And so I think, that's what I really like about our household, is that our roles, we get to define them for ourselves. What works for you is what works for you. What works for me, what works for me. And then we decide, okay, well, what does that mean for working well for our family?
Right. Exactly. Yep. We, like I said, when we do, especially things that we both do. So there are tasks that we both can do, right? And sometimes we switch them off. But as we do those things, we always say over communicate. Like we just communicate the little things that we do, so we can make sure we have. I'm a process guy, so we have the best process that we can, right? And it's not like, oh, you should do it this way or you should do it that way. It's, hey, this is the way I do it. How do you do it? Then we talk. You actually, what? I like that way. I'm gonna add this little bit to it and a dash of what I do, and then we end up kind of having a really good process on a lot of things that we do together.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know, we've got some other times where we've really been very diligent about our roles and responsibilities. Like, for example, when I went back to work after maternity leave, like I distinctly remember that morning routine. I think the morning routine was a really big thing we had to figure out. And I think that's something that a lot of the moms struggle with sometimes too, whether you have a very small baby or your kids are older. Like, you got to figure out, okay, how the hell do we all get out of the house and go to wherever we're supposed to be at this specific time? And so I remember, we don't do this so much now because we kind of just like internalize it, I guess. But we had a spreadsheet.
Yes.
Where it was like, okay, 5 a.m. Who's doing what? 5:30. This is the person doing what? 6. It was like every 30-minute increment. Every 30-minute increment from starting at like 5 to 8. So we each knew what was to be expected from the other person.
And that was Monday through Friday. So it wasn't saying, okay, we have one schedule and we just expect that to work from Monday through Friday. No, you have different things going on. Everyone's schedule is different from Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So, we laid that out. We love spreadsheets.
We do.
We love spreadsheets.
Yeah, I don't know how we wouldn't be able to live without them.
Yeah, exactly. Pen and pad, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good example of like delegating, and also but really working very collaboratively with the other person. There's just not one person here that's expected to do it all, but like even there's not one person expected to figure it all out. We have conversation about it. And then also same with like the pandemic now. I think we had to also do another version of this when we both started to work from home and C3 couldn't go back to daycare. We had to really figure out what the heck is this going to look like.
Create a family Google Calendar and started putting our different meetings in there and putting like kind of the planned feedings we wanted for him. And the other critical things we needed, because you don't realize until you're in it that the daycare plans a lot of your kid's structure, right? And you're just following what the daycare does. And then, when the daycare is gone, you're like, oh snap, I've got to figure out how this kid's day is going to go, because if I don't, it'll just be a mess. Right. And that's, we figured it out,
We did.
Yep.
So I want to kind of move into some takeaways, because we got about 10-15 more minutes we can play around with, but I want to talk about some of the main takeaways. Even before we talked about doing this episode, you and I kind of talked about what are the really important things that we want moms and families to know about delegating. And the first big takeaway, I think, was really communicating about everything, and over communicate if you can. So like you said, I know we do a lot of debriefing sessions. Actually, you just said it, how, something might work for you. And even if it's small, it might seem super small. Like I remember people would probably think we're nuts the way that we communicate. Like we had a whole dialogue about how to put on the diaper and like where the tab should go. And like, it was like, I tried it this way and this is what I noticed. And it was like, okay, well, how do you do it? Right. And we learned so much from that.
And I think a lot of that was driven by, I think he had diaper rashes. Like he has very sensitive skin, so diaper rashes. So it made sense for us to figure out the best way to do this thing. Like who's causing the diaper rashes? No, it was more so, okay, how can we do this better to prevent the things that are kind of hurting him. And then even now when we see, I call them flare-ups, but when we see little flare-ups, we communicate, hey, you know what, I see a diaper rash form, and I start to put a little A&D on there. Then that lets me know, okay, so I got to go and do that too, because sometimes I'm just kind of going through the motions, I'm not paying as much attention, and vice versa, right? So it's always making sure we're communicating, especially when there's a change to what we're doing, right? So communicating the changes, and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing now. And it's like you can do it in passing. So
exactly. Yep. I think that's a big key to this. Communicate about everything. Over communicate if you can, but especially around changes that occur.
Changes,
even if it seems small, you have to communicate that with the people around you, because they won't know otherwise.
Right. And the thing is, like, it's hard to communicate change when there's always change occurring, right? So it kind of goes back to, having a plan and sticking to a plan. That way, when you have to deviate from the plan, you know when to communicate. If you don't have a plan, everything's always different. So you don't know to tell another person, hey, this thing has changed. So that's where the plan comes into place.
Yep. And also with, communicating about everything, I think too, we kind of hit on it a lot already, but just being very, very specific and clear about roles and identifying those roles so that there's not a lot of ambiguity or uncertainty around it.
Exactly. When we talk about feedings, I do breakfast and dinner. You do you do lunches and snacks. And it's kind of, hey, what you choose to feed him on your shift is what you choose to feed him. And that's how we handle it. And it works, man. It really works.
Yeah, it does. Just you got to be very specific, because what I know, and I think a lot of the moms can attest to this, like when we're not very specific and clear about the roles and responsibilities in the home, it tends to fall on mom. And that's not okay. And that's exactly what we want to get out of that. We want to get out of that habit and that narrative. And there was something that you said that I wrote down. I want to kind of make sure we hit on this. You said that, I think you said something about like spouses or partners doing a bunch of stuff, but they don't realize that it's helpful.
Right. No. So, well, yeah. Yes. What I was saying was, a lot of times we're doing activity, right? We're doing things around the house, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this thing, and I think it's going to be helpful. It's taking stuff off of my spouse's or my partner's plate, and I'm kind of taking it from my perspective, like, oh, if someone did this for me, I would love it, but all activity isn't necessarily help, right? So it kind of goes, there needs to be a communication about what type of help is valuable, right? So, as the person doing the task, sometimes you've got to say, hey, you know what, I'm doing this thing to be helpful. And then it's your partner's opportunity to say, you know what, I love you, thank you, but I need you to go over here and do this instead. Like if you had if you had time to do one thing, I prefer you not do this. I prefer you do this because this is more helpful to me and the family. And I think that conversation needs to be had too, because like I said, all activity isn't created equal. Right. And it's about working smart, not hard. So it's really figuring out what help looks like and communicating that and making sure, if you're the person that's not doing the task, making sure you feel comfortable, or you're saying, hey, you know what, that's great, I really need you to do this. Or if you're the person who is doing the task, say, you know what, this is something I'm doing, hey, what do you think? Is this adding, or do I need to shift my energy somewhere else at this time? So
it reminds me, we recently had an episode about assertively asking for help and communicating your needs. And I think that kind of relates to that. Exactly. Yeah. If there's something that your partner or your spouse or family members doing and they think they're being helpful, but they're not, you really have to be very assertive and communicate that very clearly so that they know.
Exactly. You have to do it though in a way that doesn't take their energy around help, right? So you got to do it in a way that says they don't feel defeated, because in your head you're doing something helpful, and then someone comes and be like, no, don't do that. you gotta do it in a positive way to keep their energy around helping, but refocus it on something that's a little bit more helpful. So,
right, agreed.
Yep.
Last big thing I want to make sure that we hit on, and then we can talk about a few smaller things, is, and this one is hard for a lot of the moms, and I've talked to a lot of the moms in the Empower Wellness program about this a lot. It's just that idea of, with delegating, you really have to be okay with that person not doing it exactly your way. Yeah. You have to, with delegation, it's essentially you saying, I trust this person to do the thing that I need to have done, or the thing that I don't have the time or the capacity to do. But that doesn't mean that you then micromanage or dictate what that person's doing. Kind of like you just said it a few minutes ago with, mealtime. What you choose to feed for dinner, is something that ideally it falls back to our foundational plan of how we plan to, raise our child. But essentially, that's you. Yep. That's up to you. Yep. And so I think that one,
it's not candy,
right? But that one's hard. Just you have to really just trust that that person that you've chosen to delegate to or work collaboratively with also has the best interest for you, your family, and your child in mind.
Right. Yeah. I think if we take the feeding thing as a kind of a specific example, when you delegate something, in my mind, the way I like to be delegated to is, hey, I need you to take this over, and then leave it at that. Or it's, I need you to take this over. Let me know if you need any suggestions, you got any questions or whatever, but boom, don't micromanage me, right? I'm thinking kind of work style, but like life, don't micromanage me. So when you go and delegate something to someone, you give them the task and then ask, hey, let me know if there's anything you need, any details you need, and then let it go from there. They'll come to you because no one wants to fail at doing something, right? Maybe some people do, but then that's another podcast episode, right? But giving them the ability to navigate that on themselves, one, gives them more ownership over the task. So now it's no longer, oh, this thing is being delegated to me. It's more so, okay, I've taken this thing over now and it's mine, and I'm gonna be a beast at it. And two, it makes the delegator look less like a manager and more like someone who's just genuinely asking for help. And then you all get in that real kind of that symbiotic relationship where you're both kind of going back and forth, bouncing ideas off of each other like we do, right? So if you give somebody, hey, I need you to start feeding the kid at lunchtime, let them, give them a week to do this without any input if they don't ask for anything. Then if you start to see, hey, you know what, the kid is missing vital nutrients and stuff like that, that's where you come back and say, hey, you know what, how about we add this, right? So it's more of a, how about we add a thing, or hey, instead of you do this thing differently. So just give someone time to kind of get into the role, then provide feedback.
Right.
So
exactly. Yeah. Well, I think these were really good pointers, but a few other things I want to make sure that we kind of point out. One, I know that we talked a lot about delegating inside of the home, but there are so many other ways that you can delegate things outside of the home as well. Like, for instance, extended family, friends, family, like caretaking. Yeah. Like, for instance, our kid is with his grandma right now.
Right. So when we talk about delegating outside of the home, especially with the kid, I throw all that other stuff out the window. I'm very specific about how we want things done. And the timetables and things like that, because, we like routine. So we've gotten our routine and we have an idea. And I think it also depends on who you delegate to as well. Yeah. But I remember when the first time the grandparents started watching C3, we made them sit down in a little classroom style. We projected it up on the TV and I had little modules. Okay, this is how you feed him. These are the things that soothes him. My coworkers would make big fun of me, and I had like a little pamphlet, right? His care instructions, because like I said, I like to over communicate. So I would rather you have more information than less. So but that's very important.
But we're an odd bunch. So, but I think it goes back to, like we're saying, over communicate if you can. You don't got to go as extreme as we do, but really over communicate. But then also, like you said, it goes back to how well do you trust the people you're delegating to. Our family knows us and they know that this is how we do. And so they accepted like, okay, yeah, Amber and Cedric's at it again. They about to give me this class on how to be with this little boy.
It was literally a class.
But it worked and it made us feel comfortable and they know how we do.
Yep.
So, definitely consider, you don't have to do things all on your own. There are probably people in your life who are willing to give help and support if you ask for it, and you work collaboratively with them. But then also other things, if you have the means and the resources to do it, house cleaning, laundry, all that stuff, contract out. Last year was the first year we started to do some house cleaning and having services to get that done for us. And
I was opposed to it at first.
But then the core values of Balanced Working Mama say delegate. And
no, I loved it afterwards.
I said delegate. We don't have time, the resources. Like we are very busy people, and so it was really very handy. And I'm looking forward to us getting that back because the pandemic has kind of halted it, but it was very valuable. But then also lastly, make it fun, make delegating and collaboratively working with the people in your house and outside of your house just really fun. So for instance, whenever your children are old enough, you can also involve them in this process by making sure that they have chores or have responsibilities in the home. We can't wait till C3 is old enough to have some responsibility because he's going to have some because it then takes less off of it takes more off of your plate, so you'll have less on your plate. But then also use tools if you need to. Like, for instance, we talked about the spreadsheet, but then also our favorite is paper, rock, scissors.
Oh, yeah, that's fun. Yeah. Like, just no one wants to go. We smell it, and somebody got to go change them, right? So who's going to change them? All right, let's paper, rock, scissors it up. And that's, that's settle many a debate because, paper, rock, scissors is legit. So, yes, we definitely do that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, babe. This was great. Hopefully it was helpful. Do you have any last words for the mamas that listen to this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And yeah, just kind of in general, delegation is great. And I think, once you start to make space for other people to do things for you, it frees you up and, it's like a snowball effect, right? So then you're like, oh, well, maybe I should do more of this kind of delegating thing. And, there becomes more balance. And so I think this is a great module or lesson. I don't know what you call these things, but it's needed. It's needed. So
perfect. Thank you, babe. Mm-hmm. Hey, mama, I'm so glad you're listening to the podcast, but I also want to connect with you on social media. So be sure to follow me and Balanced Working Mama on Instagram. You can find me at Dr. Amber Thornton. That's DrAmberThornton, and Balanced Working Mama at Balanced Working Mama. BALANCEDWORKINGMAMA. Follow along, join in on the fun, but then also send me a DM to say hello. See you there. All right, mama, I hope that you enjoyed that episode with myself and my husband. I hope that it really inspired and encouraged you to really think a little bit more about the ways that you can begin to delegate in and out of your home, but then also work collaboratively with the people in your home or outside of your home so that you are not doing things on your own. So I want to leave you with a few things before we go. 3 reasons why we tend not to delegate. One is perfectionism. If we have this feeling that it has to be done a certain way and then only I can do it, or it has to be perfect, or really achieving for a very high expectation that leads you to believe that no one else can do it and it has to be you. And that prevents us from delegating and working collaboratively with other people. So we don't want perfectionism to get in the way of us delegating to other people. 2, we want to try to keep the peace. And that is something I also don't want you to try to fall into, a trap of, well, I don't even want to bother, so I'll just do it on my own. No, we have to break that cycle. If you feel as if asking for help or delegating or working collaboratively with someone will cause some upset or someone might get defensive about that, then there's just another conversation that needs to be had about that. But we don't want that to be the reason why we're not delegating. And then lastly, we tend not to to delegate because we're just not sure how to properly delegate or what to delegate. And so I really encourage you to really just sit and communicate as openly as you can about the things that you all are doing in the home, the things that you need some help with, so that you all can come up with a plan for how to delegate properly and how to work together. So let's talk about some reasons why we really need to start to delegate and work collaboratively a little bit more with the people in our lives. One, when we do not delegate, when we do not offer opportunities for other people to take on roles and responsibilities, we are robbing them of opportunity to learn and to grow. Other people cannot become proficient at certain roles or responsibilities if we don't allow them to practice and learn. A lot of the times we say, well, oh, I do it best, so I'm just going to do it, or I don't like the way that they do it. But if we don't give them opportunities to do it, they won't learn. Also, if we don't openly communicate about what we need to have done, they won't learn what we want. So we don't want to rob people of opportunity. We want to allow them to practice and to grow. Another reason why we really should start to delegate is that it creates stronger family bonds, family structure. It creates deeper, more meaningful relationships, and we all want and need that. So, definitely another reason to delegate. And then, lastly, another reason why we really need to start delegating is that it's better well being for us. When we delegate, we don't have to do it all by ourselves. So, that's less stress, less tension, less work, more time to yourself, more time to engage in your hobbies, more time to go socialize with your friends, more time to just do what matters for you because you have some help. So really, 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 really try to work on how can you start to delegate and work collaboratively a little bit more with the people around you. I know that it can feel scary, it can be hard, but mama, I know that you can do this. And on the other side of working and learning how to delegate and work collaboratively with other people, there is relief and there is freedom. And once you experience that, you'll realize that it is so much worth it. So begin to delegate, 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 and do not forget to collaborate. Hey, Mama. Thank you for listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast. If you love this podcast, please be sure to rate it and share it with another mama that you know. And don't forget to follow me and Balanced Working Mama on Instagram. I'll talk to you soon.